Hello, friends. Laverne Friesen here. Thank you for being here today. This is True Emotion Dad, the podcast where we speak our truth with authenticity. We dive deep into real life stories, healing journeys, and the powerful lessons we've learned along the way. We explore all aspects of mental health, trauma, healing, and spirituality, but we don't shy away from the darker sides of our experiences. By sharing the raw and unfiltered truth, we aim to educate, inspire, and sometimes even offer a cautionary tale. I invite you to be gentle with yourself today as you listen. Some of the topics we discuss might activate some emotions within you. This is part 2 of my conversation with Britton and Carolee Beckham. We dive even deeper into their journey of healing after leaving the Mormon church. From psychedelic breakthroughs to global travel, sacred sexuality, and rebuilding trust after betrayal. This episode is raw, real, and transformational. If you've ever questioned your path, your worth, or what healing truly looks like, this one's for you. Let's get into it.
And while under the influence of the mushrooms, in that first meeting, like 15 minutes in, we could see the indoctrination so clearly, so obviously. And we were like, oh my God, like we both looked over at each other and we were like, we're done. We're out of here. And we never looked back. It was that was the last moment of our connection to the church. And we walked away that day. So it was actually a beautiful blessing from the mushrooms to like give us that clarity that we needed to be able to see the BS, the indoctrination, the lack of freedom and free will that was given to little people. And just we were just so done with it. So that was how we left the church. And then that began our awakening journey. And what happened immediately, just like you mentioned before the call about how you created space, you accepted the reality of life and blessings flowed to you. 4 days later, after we left the church, we found ourselves at this school in a city nearby that actually was all about emotional healing and emotional intelligence and emotional processing. And I was introduced to sound healing at the same time, which became this really big passion of mine. So both of us landed in like Carolee ended up doing a whole year certification at that school. And I ended up keep going to the sound healing sessions every month. And then I got my own crystal bowls eventually and started doing sound healing myself. So 4 days after making room, the universe is like, boom, thank you for making room. Here is the new pathway. Thank you for being in the unknown. Here is the light, right?
I want to add to that. Yeah,
Very powerful.
Such a powerful experience for us to go through. But, while we left the church and didn't actually go back, our names were still in the records at that point in time. But like Britton said, I was brought to this school of emotional intelligence healing that I did for the entirety of 2020. And then in the fall of 2020, a year after our original ceremony, the church actually came out with some modifications to their handbook where they were speaking down on energy healing, basically encouraging the members of the church to avoid energy healing spaces. And because I had actually seen what the church didn't offer me when I went the route of healing the way the church said to heal, and then I had just completed this year-long program of true emotional intelligence that incorporated a lot of different energy healing modalities. The fact that the church was basically saying this pathway isn't really one that we support, I realized they actually didn't want anybody to truly heal and become sovereign and become free from the chains that engulf us when we have trauma. They didn't actually know how to hold people through their trauma. In fact, they're further traumatizing, especially by putting regulations that say healing can only happen one way. And that way didn't actually bring the healing. So it was after that that we decided we needed the energetic freedom of being connected to the church. And we took the initiative to remove our names from the church's records a year after actually stopping going. And so it's all been this journey of sovereignty in our healing, sovereignty in our spiritual relationship, and being able to create or tap into the direct relationship with God, with Source.
I love that so much. I want to get you guys to clarify something, maybe expand on it a bit, because when Britton was talking about it, you guys looked at each other and you made eye contact. And you're talking about when you're in the church, I think the next day after taking mushrooms, and you can just see the conditioning and the control. Can you expand on that? Because you both saw it like at the same time.
Yeah, we did. We actually both saw it at the very same time, and we both knew that we saw it at the very same time. And that was the beautiful thing. One, about just being a couple that's connected. Like we've always had that sort of synchronicity in our connection, and it's only improved since our healing. But we're writing a book about this whole journey. Like we've talked a lot about our time in Mormonism. The real magic happened after that initial ceremony with mushrooms, and there's some leading up to that we kind of jumped over, but it's okay. But I'll say this: when I was there at that moment, when I was watching these little kids get things whispered into their ears and then have them repeated over the microphone, I was like, boom, brought back to when I was 18, sitting in church with a friend that I had brought that wasn't Mormon. And she was watching a similar type of experience. And she was like, oh my gosh, Britton, this is indoctrination. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this is cute. The mom's whispering into the child's ear and the child says it over the microphone. And we all just think it's so cute. And I had been so indoctrinated myself, I couldn't see it. And so, but she had planted a seed in my mind. And when I was back in, fast forward almost 20 years, and I'm sitting there in church and I see this, and I'm under the influence of, having my perspective altered so that I can see things more without judgment. That's when it hit. And it was like, and she must have felt the vibration, and we both looked at each other, and I think grandma was sitting between us and one of our other children, and we kind of looked behind grandma, and we both had this like disgust look on our face of like like what, oh my god. And we just both knew. Yeah, it was just like that.
You know what's so powerful about that for me is that that's a sign from God or the universe in a church that would tell you that it was not God, but maybe the devil perhaps. But let's get into the magic of what happened after you guys left and started growing and healing. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I just want to say, so we basically, as Carolee did that program, she started bringing emotional intelligence training into our family and relationship. And that was like so important because then she was teaching me and I began doing the work with her and also getting my own processing done. And she actually ended up guiding me through this beautiful death process where I actually had near-death experiences 3 times in my life. And so there was a lot of that healing that was taking place over the year. Like it was almost like we were in the boot camp of it, her even more so than me. But I was in my own like healing space. I was in a new job, and everybody there had been Mormon at one point, and there was a lot of psychedelic usage there, and all of that had opened the minds of these people. I wouldn't say that all of them were as spiritually oriented as me. I kind of came to the realization early on after I left the church that I still wanted to be a very spiritual person, and that my connection to the divine was real and something that I cherished. And so the magic started jumping back in a number of ways. As we continued to heal, we just saw some things happen. But I want to just mention an experience that was super magical. So right after we left the church, about a month later, we had another opportunity to go to a work party for Christmas of December of 2019. And I thought, God, the mushroom experience was so powerful for us. What if we could do them again? So I kind of set up so that we could stay another night up there in Park City, Utah, and then we did another mushroom experience. And at that experience, we had it was very much around integrating a lot of religious programming that was like abusive in a way to reintegrate it into a much more holistic view. And part of that experience for me was I had what's called a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And it was really powerful for me. It brought me to a realization that I um, I am so much more than what I experienced myself to be here, and my nothing mattered. Like the big message was nothing matters, Britton. And I was, because I made everything a big fucking deal. I was so serious about everything, you know? And so like I had this beautiful nothing matters experience that taught me to let go of so much, right? And in that, so after this, it was like a moment where I was brought up into the highest frequencies. I've never had anything as strong of a healing experience as that moment, but it was like so impactful. And over the next couple of hours, I had all these downloads about relationships that I was holding judgments against and that I needed to forgive. And it was so beautiful. So it was a very spiritual experience. And I came home from that and immediately started to make adjustments to those relationships, which I had information around given to me. And so I did a lot of them were around my family. And one other thing came, it was that we needed to have another baby. But I knew if we had another baby together, that it might be the end of our relationship. And frankly, it was. It was the ultimate death that our relationship needed to go through. So, Carolee, do you want to pick it up from there? Or do you want to like talk about another experience? Like we could talk about Eva and
Well, I guess I'll add, that year of 2020 that I took this course, this Institute of Healing Arts, emotional intelligence, also helped me see where the trauma from my childhood was still resonant in my emotional body. Like I had mentioned, I had childhood sexual trauma. And I had hypothesized early in our marriage that the effects of that sexual trauma were still relevant in my sexual relationship. But I had nothing that was ever spoken of in the culture that we came from ever alluded to the fact that that could impact this, right? And so this was a novel idea for me to touch on. But the first mushroom ceremony that we had was profoundly healing. And then we were led to this course, and I took it, and I was able to see through this energy healing that I had actually disassociated as a young child in that moment, and that there was still parts of myself that were not fully in my body from having gone through what I went through, and that I was safe now to kind of call those parts back and come to a remembrance, come to a wholeness within myself. And we did this at a time where, yeah, he mentioned before that course even began in 2020. At the end of 2019, he also had our fourth child visit him, and her energy was really present during that at the same time he was having the Kundalini experience. And she was like, "Hey guys, me." And I had felt her very relevant in my field previous to that, but I knew the same thing. I had a lot of fear. If we go into this portal of having another child, infidelity could happen again. This is part of the reason why they say don't ever date a cheat. Once a cheater, always a cheater. In a lot of ways, that was the story with Britton. He was unfaithful again, and then again, and then again, and then again. And each time it was different to some degree, and it wasn't always, he did mention that there was that one moment of sexual infidelity and a lot of the other ones weren't. But in my nervous system, as the one being betrayed, it didn't really matter whether or not he was physical or not. Like the betrayal still impacted me in a very similar way, regardless of exactly what happened, right? And so that fear of that portal happening again really made me so that I didn't want to have a fourth child, even though I could feel her very present. So because of the medicine and because of what we were doing healing, we both were like, okay, yes, we'll go into this again together. And it happened again. The very thing we were afraid of, some level of betrayal occurring, happened while I was pregnant, while I was still in this deep portal of healing. And I just couldn't even imagine how to navigate that. But again, we realized, we were doing a lot of different things. I swore off at this point in time all spiritual works written by a man. And that because I had been programmed so much of my life to only hear men from the pulpit. Men are prophets, men are apostles, men are the leaders, men hold the priesthood. And so they all speak for God, and God's a man, and Heavenly Mother is so special. We just don't even talk about her. But we're Mormon. And so polygamy is in our history. So there's probably multiple Heavenly Mothers, and we just can't talk about all of them. But that's why we're all so different, because God's one white-haired dude, and he's got a variety of different women that's up there with him. Okay. And so like I had this idea that really disconnected me from the feminine spiritual path. And so part of my healing at this point in time was also, like I said, I disavowed all of it. And I was like, I'm only going to read books by women, spiritual seeking women, listening to the divine feminine voice. And that helped me root into my body. That helped hold me through it. And that helped give me the key that I needed, where I realized that the repeated betrayals and the way in which I felt in community, the more that I healed, the more my friends that were Mormon didn't really want to be friends with me anymore. They didn't want their kids playing with my kids. I had betrayal and rejection on every account in my life. I had never really felt like I had fit in anywhere. So the fact that it showed up in my marriage and my love relationship, it was just a big magnifying glass on a problem that was inherent for me, and I can tell you exactly on my natal blueprint of my astrology where it's written that this was my wound. It's there. And it's understanding that has given me so much purpose, that this was actually the wound I said I was ready to heal, to become the embodiment of the healed version of it, because so many people have these wounds and we don't really have grounded, healed, trauma informed teachers that say this is how we navigate it. And so that's the gift, that the shit I went through gets to be for others. And I can see that now, but it didn't get easier. And like Britton said, it got harder for a moment. And we really had to practice what we were learning to get through it. But also, I realized I want sovereignty. I want spiritual sovereignty. I want emotional sovereignty. I want sexual sovereignty. And I knew I had to achieve that. I had to heal that for myself, with or without him. I was just really happy that he was willing to do the work beside me for himself. And then we did. We came to many thresholds where we were like, are we going to stay together, or do we need to separate? And when we'd get there, our hearts would open and we'd realize how much we were just so sorry to have been hurting each other, and how much we just wanted to continue this journey together. And that, but arriving at those points with curious openness allowed us to feel what the yes was in those moments too, and then to move forward together. And on this side of all of it, we've got such a beautiful connection to the divine feminine now, together as individuals and also as a union, and to the divine masculine, and have reintegrated our relationship with Jesus, Yeshua, and Mary Magdalene, and understand that, the church wants to tell us that sex and things of a sexual nature are bad and wrong, and the thing that doesn't make us holy. What if the very things that we've been told our whole life make us sinful and not holy, if we can integrate them from a holy place, they're actually the key to our liberation. They're, sexual and spiritual, that's it, they're not different, right? So that's part of our message too, if like our sex and our spirituality are together as this divine union path of ascension, and that we can heal our nervous system through our own embodiment and through self-love, and that can be reflected in a partnership. And when you have that mirror, the potential of being able to dig deep into our shadows and excavate them and rise ascended beings, it like is amplified. It's so beautiful. So I'm just really grateful he stuck with me. My healing was no joke. It was pretty, and for him, there were a lot of moments where he was like, maybe we need to be separate because I'm triggering, if my very breath triggers you, which was true. It really was.
Yeah.
But he was willing to sit in that fire with me, and I was willing to sit in it too. And we were willing to do the work and be open to what that meant about us as a partnership. And now we can see that there's, I mean, our lives were meant to heal. We came here to heal, and that we came here to be in this partnership so that we could love each other and ourselves so fiercely and help the other heal. We've helped each other heal such great, great wounds.
Britton, Coralee's talked about how, Carolee. Let's do this over again.
It's okay, you're Canadian. So.
Yeah, that's right. Blame it on that, eh? Carolee has talked about, healing that betrayal and rejection. When did you start to realize that you needed healing because you were chasing something?
Yes, thank you for asking. I wanted to speak to that. So it came actually when I found myself in a similar situation with this emotional relationship with another woman again. It was like really light, but it was there and it was present, and it was like, oh God, I'm in this situation again. Why am I here again? And I'm asking myself, and I had to start asking some deep questions. The first one was I asked myself was, why am I so sexual? But that was the wrong question. But it did lead me towards the right one. And it was just opening my mind up. Why am I so sexual? Why do I have to find the need to connect with every woman I see? And then that led me to an understanding of am I over sexual, or am I actually just doing what's present within my body? Well, why is that present? Am I is it something I need to be ashamed of? There was a lot of interesting self-love questions that came up. And what is true, and what we find the pattern is healing happens in spirals. And so when we confront something, we might, as long as we take it on from a conscious level, we will heal a part of it. And we may need to come back to that thing multiple times. So what happened is, if you rewind to 2017, after I had my sexual infidelity, that was like my bottom, and I was willing to make amends and change, quote unquote. And we went to therapy, went to couples therapy, went to personal therapy.
We did the church thing.
We did the church thing. All of it didn't actually, some realizations were given and offered, and I could integrate that. But one of them I remember in therapy was, for me to feel like I have a successful marriage, I need to have sex. That was a truth that I needed to accept for myself. A sexual marriage, or a successful marriage for me, was one that was a sexually connected marriage. Okay. So that was my own personal definition. That helped me in therapy. But ultimately the healing wasn't really there through all of the church stuff, because I came out the other side and I still felt attraction to other women. But it was the wrong type of attraction. It was a leaky kind, where you see it and then you form an agenda of how to achieve something, some connection where it can evolve. That's where it's unhealed. The attraction is not a sign of unhealedness. I'm still attracted to other women. I still find incredible beauty in women, but I don't act on it, and I don't want to act on it. That's the difference. I don't hold my behavior back. I'm not trying to stop the flow. I acknowledge it. I can tell her, ooh, look at how beautiful this woman is. She's not triggered by it, and I'm speaking my truth, but I'm not ever going to act on it. And because I don't want to. I have this beautiful relationship. We have agreements that allow us to have our sovereignty within our relationship that feels very comfortable and honest and authentic and aligned. There's no capitulations on either side of our relationship of oh, I'm going to let him, or I'm going to let her. And none of that exists, because we realized all of that was bypassing. All of that was just trying to get around the main problem. So this was where I had to go into deeper healing, Laverne, and ask myself some deep questions. But ultimately, it was a lot of self-love, acceptance of the past, acceptance of who I was sexually, acceptance of what I wanted. She was so turned off that I thought I was actually hypersexual, but it was actually not the case. It just felt like that in the relationship. So that was, hopefully I've answered the question, but basically, the universe gave me a fucking hard lesson there. It was dude, you're not healed, and you need to be back in the situation so you can see it. Now, it wasn't a sexual infidelity, which I'm, oh, is that really any more better? Blah, blah, blah. Anybody can make a judgment around that, but emotionally, it was still devastating for her. Probably the worst, actually.
It was the worst.
Even the sexual infidelity wasn't as bad for her, because it was just another nail, another dart, another thing that just hit her, and And then it hit me too, like, but what was great is I actually had my healing start to integrate really rapidly after that. And so I was like, oh, I'm starting to get it, babe. I'm like starting to like see why this problem exists, and I can continue to tackle it. But we have to have a broader conversation around sexuality and what that means for us in this relationship. And that was like a trigger point. So it's like, here we're trying to heal the actual wound, but the wound itself is so triggering that it was almost impossible to try and get at it. And that's why we thought separation might be better multiple times. But ultimately, we did find that deep connection, that love that had always and does always exist between us. And we kind of surrendered to that. We felt back into that as our support and allowed that to guide us through it all.
That's amazing. And while you guys are telling your story, I keep thinking about growing up in the Mormon church and then my own background, how much sex is shameful. And that goes back to what you had said about thinking, why am I so sexual? Well, you're just a normal person. But both of you guys have both talked about how your conditioning has affected your sexual life. You go on this 5-year long journey of healing, and now you're living your dream life that's wilder than you could have imagined. How did you get there?
Well, I think that we began to get here by choosing into our healing fully, right? And we actually did that when we said, one of the things that helped me do that was when I said yes to this full year-long program in 2020, right? That year-long program gave me the foundation that I needed when at the end of 2020, he disclosed this final bit of infidelity, right? 2021 was a bit of a blur, to be honest, because now I had the most brutal infidelity that I had to deal with to heal, and postpartum depression and having this fourth child and all of that, right? And so we were still in this cauldron of like allowing ourselves to be re-educated, reading books that helped reframe understanding. I had this whole book club that I began that called other women to read the same feminine books with me and grow in community in a way that could support all of us. And so we took little steps here and there to doing the work, but things really started shifting fast when Britton decided he was going to leave his job at the end of 2021. And he knew that leaving his career was part of his soul evolution. And that was it was a long time coming, but it was still a hard one, right? Because we've got this family, we've got this home, we need to be supported and all of the belief systems. But like truly, it was keeping us both in the matrix, in the system that limited our potential. So he, at the end of 2021, left his career. In 2022, the very beginning months, he had this book that he read that was all about this idea, this concept of living the full fuck yes. And so, because of our conditioning, because of how we were raised, because it was pretty much from a very young age, I was supposed to go on a mission. Maybe I was a woman, it didn't necessarily matter, but I was supposed to go to schools that were Mormon. I was supposed to marry a return missionary. I was supposed to get married in the temple. I was supposed to, like, my whole life was planned for me. Then my kids would get baptized when they turned 8, and they'd do the same things at 12 and 16 and 21. It was just on repeat. And so I had never allowed myself to say, what would be my yes in my life? And so when he came home from a men's retreat, and we had this idea of how we were going to really live our lives in this radical way and give permission to ourselves to say yes, we started making a list. What would a yes look like? And so that's a scary threshold to be at, because a lot of times we want to give ourselves excuses. I want this, but, or often we hear it a lot when we're working with individuals and couples where people make excuses for their partner. I'm a yes, but my partner, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you're leading with your no. Let's all lead with our yes. Where's our yes in our life? And so with that, we made a list. We called in a sexual re-education because we both knew that we didn't have that programming from our childhood. We called in traveling experiences with our kids. One of the things that really helped.
Yoga teacher training.
Yeah. One of the things that really helped me in my healing was yoga. And I had been part of a trauma-informed container for women that had all been through betrayal. And so I had done yoga in that context, and that was super transformative. And so I really wanted to do a teacher training, and so we had these ideas, and that got this ball rolling to where by June of 2022, we had already traveled with our kids down to like Arizona and back. And we had just done a sexual re-education retreat that was in the mountains of Colorado. And then we had gotten home from that, and we felt completely renewed and understood ourselves in ways we had never yet. And then we decided we were going to sell everything. So we put our house on the market, and we had no plans of exactly where we were going to go, but we were in this free fall into our yes and trusting of where we were being led. So, a lot of people in the neighborhood thought we had lost our mind, and some of them still do. We talked with some friends back in Utah in the spring, and they mentioned some of our old neighbors were like, they've gone off their rocker. And I'm like, this is good, but
You should try it.
yeah, we moved our family to Bali that fall. We sold our house, sold all of our furniture, moved to Bali, did our yoga teacher training in Bali, lived there in Bali for 5 months, and realized that Bali wasn't home, but it was a really good place for us to be. And then we decided to continue on, and that evolved into a really like intuitively led journey of yeses. What was the next yes? Vietnam felt like a good yes. France for 3 months was a good yes. Ireland, England, Harry Potter experience with the kids for 10 days through England and Scotland. That was a big yes, and then Egypt was a huge yes. So we lived this yes life.
We didn't, yeah, it was like whatever came up, like whatever opportunities were arising, we were just like, let's just do it. And so we were fully committed to living that full fuck yes and feeling what it was like to just say yes to the opportunities that were before us. And granted, we had been given a massive blessing financially, so that, selling the home I bought the home only 3.5 years before, but due to the way the markets were, it doubled in price. So I was like able to make a lot of money on it. And then I got some coins I bought right at the drop at COVID, and all of that expanded. So there was just this financial abundance that we had never experienced, that when we dropped into saying yes, like this, it was like the heavens opened and stuff. So this is where all of the magic, we were just like, wow, I can't believe all of this is happening for us in such a beautiful way. And we renewed our relationship. We actually did a full new union ceremony in our room, and like remarried ourselves under our new agreements, and like decision that we were just going to live the life we wanted to live and not live for anyone else. And all of this was just empowering. And as we empower ourselves, the universe is like, hell, fuck yeah, that's why you're here. So let's get you onto your path. And that's what it's been. So we've slowly been led down this path. And where we are now is teachers of shadow work, because we know how powerful it is. We know the potency, and we actually have a technique that works. We work with the moon and its phases, its cycle, and it illuminates the shadow work that we all need to do. So it's been a super powerful journey for us. And what we're doing is helping people step into their own awakening path using a technique that we've developed, which kind of intersects ritual, the cosmos, the cosmic clock is what we call it, and sacred sexuality. So that's our journey. It's just been magical and lovely. And yes, it has been hard. While we were traveling, it was not fucking fairy tales the whole time. It was difficult, and there was some still spiraling healing rounds we had to confront around our relationship, which is fine. Like we had made the commitment to go all in on each other, live the full fuck yes just in the relationship. And that also led us to like getting deeper purity on that intention. And we have it, and we love it. We love the relationship we have now, because we wake up and we're just so turned on by each other. Like our eros is so alive in our relationship, and our commitment to emotional and spiritual fidelity and the healing work is just present before us all the time. So when we come into a conflict that happens to be with our children, or the community, or with our own relationship of some kind, like we immediately understand what protocol to use to drop into that and gain the wisdom, get out of the pattern, and reframe it so that we're consciously creating our experience instead of being victims to it. That was the biggest change we've had. It's like we've just stepped into being conscious co-creators.
Is amazing. I have a couple of questions about your life now, but I just want to take you back very briefly. And because I want to clarify something, Carolee, did you say that your child or your children get baptized into the Mormon Church at 8?
8 years old is the age where baptism occurs in Mormonism. Yes. It's not something that's done in infancy. There's a scripture in the Book of Mormon which basically says, I'm not even going to try to quote it, but the idea is that there's an age of accountability, and that at that age of accountability, that's when children.
Well, that's when they're susceptible to sin, so they need baptism.
Yeah.
The church I grew up in was similar. Children had to have a born again experience, usually right around, they would start getting pressure around the age of 11 or 12. But, at that age, and especially at the age of 8, you can't make a decision at that age and then be held accountable for the rest of your life for that decision.
For eternity.
Yeah, right. And even in Canada, you're not criminally responsible until you're the age of 12. And then even then, it's just so much easier on them. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that. I wanted to clarify that. So I want you to describe, because I can see it in your faces, I can hear it in your voices. Describe the difference of living in the dark, asleep in the Mormon church, in even the first couple of years afterwards, and then living your fuck yes. And then also you knew that, or you felt called to do something different. And then that's why you sold your house, went traveling for a while. How did that show up?
Clarify that second question. How exactly did it show up, or what are you saying?
Yeah, like were you just inspired one day? This is what we're going to do. Did you both, was it a gradual process? How did that kind of calling come to you guys?
So I actually had read a book called The Illusion of Money, and it gave this idea of going all in on yourself. And that's what I needed. I was in deep depression after leaving my career. And I don't know what the universe, what are you doing, universe? Why did you ask me to do this? It's my whole safety and security. And so I read this book and I listened to it while I was at this men's group, and I came back and I realized what hit me during that book was I need to go all in instead of scarcity mindset, hoarding my money, saving it. And I was very scared, scarcity minded. So we did, and that's when Carolee said we wrote out all those things. And one of those things was the YTT. And what happened was got an email, the yoga teacher training, 200-hour yoga teacher training was one of the things we wrote down. We're just going to say yes, universe, whatever you send to us, we will say yes to. And I got an email, probably it was a week and a half later.
Yeah,
it was not long. And it was from one of my favorite musicians at the time, MC Yogi. And it was hey, come do a yoga teacher training with us in Bali. And I was hey, I just saw it. And I was hey, you want to go to Bali? Almost jokingly, but kind of serious. And she's oh, what? And I'm 30-day yoga teacher training in Bali with MC Yogi and his wife, Amanda. And I was yeah, could we do it? 4 kids, can we do it? And we were thinking and so Carolee and I always loved traveling. We did a lot of short travels and different things like that. And we'd always just dreamed of just traveling the world together. But when we had the kids, it was impossible. It just seemed impossible. And money-wise and time-wise and all the things. And so when we finally did go to Bali and do the yoga teacher training, we just thought Bali would be the new home while we were there, because we'd already sold everything. And by the way, when we decided to do the YTT, we weren't going to sell everything to go do the YTT. It just happened that YTT was planned and kind of given an opportunity after we had already committed to sell everything. So we just were going to be in Bali, and we just said, well, let's just go to Bali and we'll just start there. And we thought we'd just make a new home. But halfway through that experience, it was clear that Bali wasn't going to be home. And that's when we were well, what should we do? Oh, let's do the thing we've always wanted to do, which is travel the world. And so that's when we just opened the world up, and we said, we're just going to go to all these places and have a spiritual pilgrimage. And a month later, this opportunity to do Egypt, and the most spiritual, beautiful, it was a vision came to me the night before. Carolee gets on her phone in the morning, doesn't even know I had this vision of being in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, meditating. And I was how can I do this? I know the tourists can't do this. How can I do this? the next morning she sends me this thing on Instagram, not even knowing that I had that. And it was like this private invitation for a 2.5 week experience in Egypt, all along the temples, visiting all of them, doing ritual in each one and having private access to them. And I was like, boom, there it is. I'm like, how did you know? And she was like, I didn't. And so we ended up buying that like immediately. We were like one of our first customers for that journey. And we were so excited because it was going to take place, months later, but we were like so gung ho. So that's what led us to Egypt. And it just ended up working out. Like she wanted to be in France for
I
her
had
40th.
said at age 35 that I was spending my 40th in Paris, and there was this beautiful, it was like this alignment.
It just happened, right?
We were in
So,
Paris on my 40th birthday, just like I had said it needed to
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
So we've just seen all this synchronicity, this magic, as we opened up to the universe and said, hey, just lead us. Then it was like, sure. And we just said yes to everything. And that's really where it's not easy always, because some of the decisions can be difficult, but it's what yields the greatest experiences.
And to kind of, I think Britton sort of answered the second question first before answering the first, but I think it's important. It's like kind of the order in which to answer it, right? Before, we had been living a life that on the outside looked really good, right? At least, from my perspective, right? I was this Mormon girl who I served a mission, and my husband had served a mission. He was this really attractive Mormon dude, and we had beautiful children in a house that we decorated in a lovely way with a white picket fence. And my kids were in programs and soccer, and I was a soccer mom, and my daughter did competitive dance, and I was like in this busy hustle culture. But I didn't actually feel like I was connected with very many friends. And I felt like the people in my life, even those from church, there was this pressure and this expectation from church that made the relationships not as like truly authentic. That there was this dependency within the system. And, we, like like we mentioned earlier, we did this week-long retreat that was a sexual, spiritual, shamanic experience that was a re-education for us to understand. And it was deep inner child healing. It was profound. And we dropped in with a group of people here in Colorado for that, and then went back home to our home in Utah. And like within 24 hours of being home, I'm getting text messages from other parents saying, our kids won't play with your kids anymore. And there was no reason. There was nothing, and so it's like this energy of, okay, we're all going through the same motion of living the same life and the 9 to 5, and I'm providing for my husband and being a homemaker, and like that trad wife. I was really good at it. I'm really good in the kitchen. I'm so good with creating really yummy food, but it was so surface. It wasn't really the depth of my soul fulfillment, and there was still pain. I mean, part of what we didn't mention is before we called in our new union, we had a period of time where living together in the house, even sleeping together, even still being intimate together, he had burned our marriage certificate, and I had burned the dress that I married him in, the one I wore into the temple. To get married, I had torn it up and I had burned it in the ashes. And essentially, we were burning the ideas and the programming of the life we were given of what constituted a successful relationship. We had to burn it, and we had to give space before we were able to call in what was really aligned for us to like tap into what we wanted, right? And so the difference of that to now it's like every single day is my choosing. Every single day I wake up and I'm excited and I'm safe in my body. I don't have any more trauma. I don't have PTSD at all. We've done the work so deeply and somatically that I can speak my truths. He can speak his truths. We have a very thriving sexual life together, that's fun and playful and expansive. We have our curiosities alive. We have really great relationships with our kids. It was not easy with our children leaving everything behind and moving across the world. There was some resistance for sure. And, the way in which we parented our kids through that. But ultimately, on this side of it, they're so grateful they've traveled the world. Their favorite places they've expanded and they've seen, and it's really given them this foundation for who they get to be in their life, you know. And so we've got this really beautiful, magical little family group. It's everything I dreamed that I could have, but I was so far from the realization of it. But now, because of our healing, you know, I wake up in the morning and I get to, most days I get to start by making love, you know, and like that's a powerful way to start the day, in the safe embrace of somebody that you are 100% committed to, and you know that they are too. You know, we've been through hell together, and on this side of it, it's like all that fire has allowed us to.
And it's so lovely. And I
Yeah.
would just add that the trust is totally back. You know, we're not faking it. This isn't just like a dance of like, oh, it's real. And the trust for myself is back. Like I told you early on, like I had no trust for myself. It was like non-existent. I could not trust who I was. Now I have a gnosis of who I am. Part of that came through that Kundalini experience too, which was really powerful for me. But it was like through all the healing work, right? All the healing work began to help me build trust in myself. And now I understand. I have the wisdom of the past, and totally trust who I am and what we are. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Your guys' story is so beautiful. And I would guess that the trust now is stronger than it was ever before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't even compare.
Yeah. What to me is so fascinating is that the synchronicities and the divine guidance is coming to both of you guys at the same time, like the trip to Europe, or Egypt, the trip to Egypt. And I was struck because I also did the 200-hour yoga teacher training. And my experience was very similar, where I just had this thought and I was instantly alive with it. It didn't make sense, but I followed through and I learned a lot about myself. I would love to talk to you guys all day. There's so much we could talk about. Talk about the shadow work that you do a little bit more, because I've actually never heard of using the moon to shine light on the shadow. And I'm fascinated by that.
Okay, I'll give a quick little, like, how we even tapped into that. So, in the thick of our story of trauma and everything, we've kind of really done a thorough job, I think, today of painting where we really were. I was given a book that was essentially moon bathing, and it had tea blends that you make to pour into the water and outlined the phases of the moon and the seasons. And so it was like, it's a full moon in winter. Here's a ritual, a little self-love ritual that you can do with your bath time. And it's just how I started to like show self-love. I really desperately needed it. I had so much trauma in my system, and being a mom and taking care of kids, like the bath time at the end of the day with a glass of wine and a nice bowl of mousse au chocolat was a place to really make me feel okay. But what I didn't realize as I began to bathe with the moon was that I was actually syncing to what we call the cosmic clock. See, at the moment of our birth, we come in, and you can see this when you look at where you were born and the time of day that you were born at. Location does matter to get the clearest picture, but it's essentially like where all the planets, the whole planets, Venus, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus, the North Node, your moon, your sun, like everything had a place in the cosmos when we were born. And that's a blueprint of who we are. And you can really read it and see. And then you have the transits. That was the moment of our birth, but the cosmos are still alive and active, and the energies are still illuminating through the planetary bodies to us here on the earth. So the alchemists of old understood this. They had a phrase, maktub, in Arabic means it is written. The alchemical adage is as above, so below. The stars and the cosmos and the earth is connected. And we as humans, this is Mary Magdalene's teachings, are equally human and equally divine. We're the bridge between heaven and earth, right? And a lot of what we can see that as is on our cosmic blueprint. So what I was doing when I was literally just bathing with the moon, it's as easy as that, is I was syncing linking to this energetic cycle. And then after a while, I began to pay attention to astrologers and what they were saying. Oh, guess what? This full moon is in the sign of Scorpio and it's aspecting this, and these are the themes. And as I read what they were saying about the moon, I was like, how does this person across the planet who's never even met me, through what they're saying astrologically, how are they perfectly describing the exact thing that I'm going through this week? And I realized that there was really something powerful to this cosmic alignment. And so then I began to be so curious about the study of astrology. Now it's like a language that I speak very fluently. In fact, that's the call we have after this, is I'm giving an astrological reading to a woman, illuminating her birth chart and teaching her how the moon goes through phases. It's new, it's dark right before it's new, and then it gets full, and then it decreases. And this cycle of the phases is mirrored in our own life of what and the illumination, it's like it illuminates the shadow. And so it's like this synthesis of that understanding and the astrology, and then how to like work with the moon to manifest. With new moons, we call in the energy and we can move forward, and the energy builds. With a full moon, it's a perfect time for release, for letting go. We identify the themes of that moon and really see how it actually is playing in our life, and use the moon to help us with that release. So that's kind of the overview introduction of what we do. And it's a bit more detailed in practice, but yeah.
And it's really truly a beautiful thing. It's such a guiding energy for shadow work. Shadow work is two sides. It's the masculine and feminine component. There is a masculine and feminine component to everything, right? It's part of the base energies that make up reality. But the masculine energy of healing is to release the energy. Okay, so we're sending it out, we're doing yoga, we're doing something that allows the energy to move through us, right? Emoting is part of that. But there's a feminine component, and that component is the inward dimension. It's the inwardness, discovery, integration, wisdom, the intuitive component that we all must confront. If we do not do this part and we continue to just do the yoga and we continue to just like go to a sound healer or cry, like none of that actually resolves the problem. It's a way that we do have to get rid of the energy and let it flow. But without that feminine component, then we are sort of stuck. Okay, we'll loop. Now, the moon provides that guidance for us because the moon represents the emotional component. The moon represents the intuition and the wisdom and the feminine. And healing is the path of the feminine. I'm just, as a guy, it doesn't mean that you become emasculated by healing yourself. You actually just become balanced. You become intuitive. You actually bring in the energies that you've sort of denied yourself because of cultural, things. And so when we step into that feminine, we go inward and we allow ourselves to feel, to intuitively connect to reasons and connect the dots inwardly. Then we can see what the spiritual dimension of our healing really is, and we get the opportunity to rewrite it. So that's what we teach, and we use the moon as a guide for every person, because there's a specific illumination for each person of how the current moon cycle is going to illuminate your shadow. And so we actually tap into that individually. It's a very specific type of modality that is offered for healing, and we believe it's very powerful. And when done in union with another, becomes extra powerful. So that's why we love talking about it, because we're showing people not only can you use the cosmos for this, which many people are already doing, but when you do it in union with somebody, all of a sudden your partner becomes your mirror, and that sacred container now becomes a place of safety and non-judgment to express, emote, talk, and vent or say whatever you need to say, and then get the feedback that brings you back into your centeredness without the ego. And that is a very powerful way of healing. And we have done that for years now, and we love it, and we just make it ritual. It's part of our experience. There's no end to the healing journey. It's just what's next. And the magic happens as you heal. It's not like something you get. It's not as a destination. It happens as you heal.
Absolutely. And that's so beautiful. I I never really paid a lot of attention to the moon cycles or anything like that. But over the last couple of years, I started to realize that on the full moons, it would bring forth things within me that I needed to heal.
Mhm.
And as I paid attention to that, it was like, it started out with, why am I so emotional today? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on with this? And then I'm like, oh, it's a full moon and it's, it's telling me something. And so then I got to address it, which was so amazing. Man, you guys, this has been an amazing conversation. I think we could go for hours. How do people contact you if they want to learn more?
So our website is themagicalstoryofus.com. So at themagicalstoryofus.com, that's kind of our brand for what's happened. And it means, it's kind of a dual meaning. It's like, here's our journey, here's our message, here's our magical story. But there's a magical story waiting for everybody. And we want to help people unlock that by accessing their healing. So our key focus in the services we offer are around transformational coaching and guided, astrologically aligned shadow work. And then, of course, we add in for advanced participants, we have an ability, have a program for sacred sexuality integration. Carolee and I also offer an infidelity, reframing infidelity program, which will guide a couple or even an individual that's already like moved on, from their infidelity experience, whether you're the one receiving or the one that had violated. This program helps you re-empower yourself, give you the freedom that you truly want, helps you to get out of victim mentality and basically start to tap back into your power. Carolee also does like a Will of the Year thing. We have a lot of different offerings on the website, but themagicalstoryofus.com.
That's awesome. I want an answer from each of you. If you could say, two sentences or one sentence to someone that was stuck and hadn't been able to start their healing journey or had just discovered, infidelity in a partner, what would you say to them?
I would say that the challenging aspects of our life actually don't make us victims, they make us warriors. And if we can look at everything that's happened and everything that potentially could happen that we're afraid of and turn our fear into the excitement of the possibility for healing, it's even written in the stars, right? Some people have incredibly harsh aspects on their birth chart, but that shows the depth to which we dive into ourselves is the height to which we can rise. And so if we really hold, yeah, you're going through a hard thing. I've been there. It's brutal on the nervous system, but healing is possible. And it's really only possible not through bypassing it, not through control of another person's behavior, but through truly coming to know yourself. This is the path of gnosis, of self-realization, of awakening to the true magical power that we have as human beings. And so it's like, yeah, you're in a portal. It's possible to rise out of that portal like a phoenix from the ashes and to birth your highest destiny. I'm living proof. We're living proof that that's possible.
Yeah, I would say healing is the most important work that anybody could do, not just for themselves, but for their own relationships and for the planet, the collective at large. So a lot of times what I say is, truth is packaged in paradox. That's how you know it's a true, objective, like universally true concept or idea, is it will become packaged in paradox, at least in our earth density. Like for example, if I focus on my own healing, then my external environment changes. Like what? Like I focus on myself and my outside reality changes. Okay, so that's a paradox, right? So all of those beautiful healing paradoxes they sort of show themselves in the journey. And so what you'll do is you'll end up putting the attention on you, but not in a selfish, egotistical way, but in a way of like, oh, I love myself. I want to heal. I want to have a better life. I don't want to be in trauma all the time. I don't want to have emotional reactions all the time. I want to be centered. That attitude brings about the reality that you truly desire. And that's what we are here to like as living embodiments of that. We met all the shadows. We continue to meet our shadows, not like all of them. We continue to meet them with courage and faith, and that will yield the greatest undoubtedly, hands down, there's no amount of other connection, networking, money, gift, inheritance, whatever that you could achieve that will surpass the blessings of doing your inner work. So that's my message to the world.
Thank you, you guys. That is so beautiful, and it is so true. I can see you guys are on this amazing healing journey. You're making the world a better place. You're stopping the generational trauma in your family lines. Your kids are going to be so grateful for it if they're not already. So thank you for gracing us with this amazing conversation.
Thanks,
you.
Laverne. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining us today on this crazy ride we call life. It's an amazing ride. So sit down, buckle up, and hold on. I will see you on the next one. And as always, much love, Laverne.